Welcome to another video, Purple Political Talk here. And today we're going to be talking about the 2020 presidential election and looking at what is Joe Biden's best case scenario in this election electorally. What would his scenario look like, and by how much would he win? So when it comes to best case scenarios, it has definitely been changing a lot since the race has tightened up a little bit, and then also just general areas where Biden's pulling a little better or a little worse than maybe he was a couple weeks ago. So we're going to take a look at that. But before we begin, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So let's get started. So to begin with, we have our map that would look like the map we would start off with, like the save margins in our regular prediction. So why am I starting off like this? Because we need to denote the changes that would happen in a Biden best case scenario with the safe states. Because again, in a best case scenario where Joe Biden could be squeezing down the margins for the Republicans in their safe states might not be the same as in a regular scenario. So first, we're going to talk about the states that the Republicans will lose some support in, and states that the margins will go down in the best case scenario for Joe Biden. And those states include states like Montana, Alaska, Missouri, and the state of South Carolina. Those are the three biggest options, four biggest states that would turn into a little bit more contested, I guess, in a Biden best case scenario. These states would become competitive. However, we don't know if Biden can go the whole mile and win there. So we're going to talk about that and fill those states in when we fill them in for the person and their margin. And what states would go from the likely lean Democratic column, even in some cases, all the way from going into the safe column. These are states like Colorado at this point, or states like Virginia, that honestly, because of a lot of Democratic support, and especially in the best case scenario where you would assume and you would be implying, since this is a hypothetical scenario, there are many things that need to happen, that voter excitement for Joe Biden should be through the roof here. Progressive and all Bernie bros must go out and vote. And minorities must go back to Biden at the levels or higher than they were for Hillary Clinton, which right now, looking at some of the recent minority polls where they ask individual minorities, Joe Biden is underperforming Hillary Clinton. I'll give you one great example, the state of Florida. We saw Latinos. Donald Trump increased there a lot. So if Biden is not able to win the majority or majority of minorities, I mean, he's probably going to still win the minorities by a bigger margin, but by as much as Hillary Clinton did, the chances of him winning the election could be low. So, for example, states like Colorado and Virginia that are minority heavy, they are very, very liberal states in the case of Colorado, and they're moderate in Virginia. So there's like a big mix of both. Joe Biden's going to have to appeal directly to that type of voter to win there by a safe margin. So now that we filled in all the safe states and we've changed the map to what a Biden best case scenario through the safe margins will look like, let's talk about the states that the Republican Party will win by likely margins. So these are almost the states that I just declassified and moved down. So those are states like Montana, states like Alaska, states like South Carolina, and states like Missouri. These states in a Joe Biden best case scenario, I would believe it will still go to Donald Trump, but not by the margins of 15% or more. These would be margins where we see Donald Trump winning by a pretty solid margin, I guess, of 10%. That means that a lot of these places, the races are narrowing down in a best case scenario. And honestly, it could get as close as being 6 or 7 points in states like South Carolina, where the Democrats have a lot of enthusiasm there. So honestly, that's one of the states to watch, I would say, when it comes to getting a lot closer. Is it probably going to go the whole mile and flip for Biden? Not very likely, I would say. Just looking at some of the forecasts as well from JSK, 538, and The Economist, you have states like South Carolina still at 99% chance of going for Trump. However, margins will definitely narrow in this scenario. And honestly, if you look at this, Alaska, a state that usually is a little bit more liberal right now, is trending a lot more third party, has a lot of anti-Trump vote. That state, again, could narrow down. Missouri, a lot of minorities that are excited to go out and vote. And moderate Republicans are leaving the Republican Party in a certain level again. So that's an interesting thing to watch. In Montana, there's a lot of excitement for Democrats because of Steve Bullock. Does that mean that because Bullock is probably going to win, does that mean Biden's going to win there? No. They don't vote down ballot. However, that might definitely help when it comes to bringing up the margins for Joe Biden. Overall, I would say that this race will be very close, I would say, when it comes to the election. And in a Biden best case scenario, we would see solid Republican states narrow down into the likely margin. So for Republicans, we can see they have these states. But what about the Democrats in a Biden best case scenario in the likely margin, or 5% or more until 15%? So we would see states like Nevada. I would say states like Arizona at this point, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. These states I would expect for them to go by a likely margin in a best case scenario for the former vice president. These are all states where he currently is leading in the polls. He is currently leading in forecast, and he's currently leading by substantial margins. And if anything, right now these seats are very contested. And honestly, to do this, he's going to have to carry a big part of the independent vote. And I think he's capable of doing that, especially in the Rust Belt, where a lot of these voters, they're looking at some of the good parts about a Trump economy or a Trump presidency and some of the bad parts about a Trump economy and a Trump presidency, which that's realistically, those are the people that decide. If the economy is good for you in one place, that does not mean that it's good for everyone. So just looking at a best case scenario, states like Nevada, I would say right now would be kind of the furthest in the likely column. I would think narrowly still be in the likely column because this is a state where Donald Trump doesn't have too far of a lead compared to states that Hillary Clinton won in 2016, or he's not too far behind. So honestly, Joe Biden could just do the finishing touches, probably carry a lot more of some of these voters, and probably win it by 6, 7, 8% in a best case scenario. States like Arizona, this state is going to be close just because you have the suburban vote, which it's pretty close because again, some of the suburban voters, after some initial little riots in Arizona, they got a little bit scared. And not because, I mean, the Democrats are directly funding these riots. That's a conspiracy theory, and I'm not here to discuss conspiracy theories. But the Republican Party is making it seem like that. So, look, when it comes to being true or not, I mean, we won't ever know all of that. But just looking at the political side of it, the Republican Party has been able to manage those ads where they paint these Democrats as these anarchists, as these people who don't want law and order, like they use Trump phrase. Honestly, at this point, that is a very smart move politically, trying to go and target these voters in Arizona, especially in Maricopa County, the most important county in the state of Arizona. And honestly, I think that doing that, like, they've been able to manage that, but I think those voters are on the fence, and if they go to Biden by a larger margin, I would see the state of Arizona going by around 5 to 6 points. In the Rust Belt, right now, the biggest lead is surprisingly in the state of Pennsylvania. Poll number-wise, forecast, they currently expect Michigan to be the safest out of the four to flip for Biden. So honestly, at this point in time, I would just say that in the Rust Belt, for Biden to win here by landslide margins, I guess, by winning in the likely margins, we're gonna have to see certain things. And in this case, it would be kind of a little bit less of the effects of the rioting in Wisconsin and all of that. And if the Democratic Party is able to turn that around, I think they should be fine. And just fighting a strong economy. Like, does he have an economic plan that would appeal to these voters? If he does, which, I mean, Biden's economic plan, it's a good economic plan. But I don't know if they're going to directly appeal to these voters. It's going to come down to that. But in the best case scenario where momentum is sky high for Biden, and honestly, for that to happen, we're going to have to see whoever wins the election most likely will start gaining a lot of momentum in the next couple of weeks because essentially people are voting a lot earlier than usual for a large part of the country. So the next 2 weeks are crucial, especially for independent voters. So honestly, if Biden is able to end like the next month, like end September and early October on the high note, states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania might go into the likely margin. And in a best case scenario, we might even see that. And the last state we put in the likely margins right now in a best case scenario for Joe Biden, we are seeing the state of New Hampshire. So this is a state that I would say is a little bit interesting on how they vote. They have like suburban ideals, even though they mostly are small towns. And Joe Biden's probably going to be able to appeal here. Now, here's the thing. He's not been campaigning there. And honestly, that's one of the issues I've seen with the Biden campaign, and why their best case scenario cannot be as strong as it was or once was, is because they're not diversifying the map. And at this point, they're putting a lot of the eggs in the Midwestern basket, which, again, if you ask me, it's a pretty good strategy. If you guarantee you lock down those states, you don't have to focus on anything else. However, if something goes wrong in something goes south, and something goes wrong in the Midwest, they're going to have to do something about it. So honestly, that's one of the issues I'm seeing right now with the Biden campaign. It comes to having more states to rely on. But a state like New Hampshire wouldn't be that hard for him to win, considering Hillary Clinton won there in 2016. And at the end of the day, I think we could see Joe Biden win here by around 5 points in his best case scenario. So looking at this map, I mean, the Republican Party has a pretty horrible map if Joe Biden's best case scenario goes through. And compare that to a Republican best case scenario, which we're going to do a video on tomorrow, that at this point, the Democrats have a very strong map. Just going off the likely margins, Democrats already won the election with 124 electoral votes still up in the air. So now that we talked about all the likely races, we have Donald Trump at 125 electoral votes and Joe Biden at 289. What about some of the lean Democratic states? So in the best case scenario for Joe Biden, we would see states like North Carolina and Florida go by lean margins for the former vice president and Senator Kamala Harris. And here's the thing, with these states, the momentum for Biden is there in North Carolina, not so much in Florida. And when it comes to polling numbers and things like that, polling numbers have been slipping in Florida for Biden. So at this point in time, Florida would probably be a lot closer. Even in a landslide scenario, I think he could win there by 3 points maximum in Florida. In North Carolina, I think he could also do about 3 points. Remember, Florida and North Carolina states that tend to be more Republican, the way they vote and things like that. With the Latino community, including all races, a recent NBC Marist poll that included Puerto Ricans and Cubans, Venezuelans, which are the biggest groups of the Latinos in Florida, we're seeing that Joe Biden is heavily underperforming Hillary Clinton. So that's going to be a problem for him in certain cases. And I think at this point in time, these two states, if Joe Biden is able to gain back that support amongst Latinos, he could go up even into the higher lean margins, more of the 5% range. But right now, I think he's honestly at about, I would say, like the 3-point range in those two states. So honestly, I think the Democrats have a very good map. And compare that to the Republicans who are struggling a little bit more. So now that we filled in the lean states for the Democrats in a best case scenario, let's talk about the lean states for the Republicans. There's only two, I would say, at this point, and those are the two districts. Although these two districts, I would say, could probably go to Biden in his best case scenario, it's debatable, I guess. What I feel about these two districts and what I'm seeing with recent polling data is, even if Biden does very well, first of all, these two districts are very interesting. Nebraska is a lot more liberal, I guess, but they only go out and vote in liberal candidates by the masses. Inspirational candidates move that. And even in the best case scenario, I think Biden could get a lot closer. And Maine 2nd Congressional District, I think it could be even a lot closer. It's a district where Democrats are becoming a little bit more unpopular. However, Democrats they won in 2018. At this point, it's looking like the Republican will win the House race here. And that momentum might transfer on to Donald Trump. Again, these two districts are hard to analyze because we don't have that much data from here. But from what I'm seeing, I think in a best case scenario, I could see those two districts narrowly being in the lean column for the Republican Party. So whatever's left on the map that's not filled in would essentially be your 4 Republican identity states that honestly are the swing states that the Republicans are in the biggest jeopardy of losing from going, some of them, in the likely column to maybe even going to the Democrats. So in a best case scenario for Biden, I think he could carry Texas. I think he could carry Georgia. I think he could carry Ohio. And I think he could carry Iowa. I think he could carry all those 4 states. And, I mean, you could say the argument that, Texas would probably go by a little bit less to Biden if it does go to Biden than a state like Iowa or Georgia, but I think they're going to fall under the same place. And essentially, 1, because they're in a similar situation. 2, Donald Trump is leading in all these places by similar margins. In Texas, it's going to be a very historic flip if it ends up happening. First time in a while that a Democrats wins in Georgia, in Texas, especially the modern Democrats. And I think at this point in time, Biden winning here would probably be a very big sign that the election went a lot more in favor of him. And with the state of Texas, it's going to come down to the voters and Democratic voter turnout. If they're not able to get the Hispanics out, they're not able to get all those voters out, they might not even get close to getting that amount of electoral votes in Texas or get the popular vote needed. However, I think honestly, Joe Biden will be capable in a best case scenario where, again, in a best case scenario for it to happen, everything must align correctly. You must have very strong momentum, very good policies, be popular amongst the nation, and honestly, that's something that could make or break a campaign. We've seen it in the past. With the other states like Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, these are three states that have Republican identities, but they will vote Democrat and have gotten close to voting Democrat. Georgia, you have a lot of the Atlanta suburbs, which are constantly changing and becoming a lot more Democrat. In Ohio and Iowa, you have Democrats that could appeal to more rural voters. Like, for example, in a very rural district in Iowa, Abby Finkenauer, we saw her carry that district in 2018, which shows us that there is those movements for some Democrats like that in those states. And these are states that, yeah, they do have the DNA for the Republican Party. They still are not afraid of voting for the Democratic Party. So overall, best case scenario for Joe Biden is very interesting. And I believe that in best case scenario for Joe Biden, he would carry around 411 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 127. At the end of the day, a lot of things need to happen. But if this ends up happening, we're going to see a very strong year for the Democrats. So this is my prediction for Joe Biden's best case scenario in the 2020 presidential election. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and help us reach 1,000 subscribers in the next month because we're very close. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and goodbye.